I didn't write this headline to attract attention or scare anyone. It's just that all the facts in this case are so shocking and go against any logic that I believe that it will simply make you feel chills down your spine. In this episode, I will tell you the true story that inspired the movie The Exorcist. Let's begin with the fact that the main character of our story was not even called Robbie Hunkeler. This was the name given to him by doctors and people around him. Later, after everything happened, the boy and his whole family changed their names. Not just for themselves, but also for their future children, so that no one would ever know who they really were. After reading all this, you might decide that I'm making it up and that all of this is nonsense, but I assure you that every word I say is true. And I have documents confirming this, so while listening to me, you can decide for yourself what you think about it, but don't jump to conclusions so quickly. Let's sort it all out chronologically. So, little Robbie Hunkeler was born in 1933. By 1948, he was already a teenager, and he lived with his parents and two sisters in Cottage City, Maryland. Among his relatives was his aunt, Harriet, who raised the boy almost like her own son. Aunt Harry was a medium and practiced spiritualism. She believed that the souls of the dead could communicate with the living through certain objects. She often used a Ouija board to contact the spirits of the dead. Of course, at first, this did not bother anyone. After all, these were just games. But then Aunt Harry died. Soon after her funeral, strange things began to happen in the house where Robbie lived. His bed began to shake violently at night. When the boy's mother entered the room, she heard scratches and knocks coming from inside the closet. Then she saw something terrible. Robbie was sitting on the bed with scratches and bruises all over his body. And the next day, everyone noticed that the sheets on the boy's bed had been torn apart. Robbie said that he hadn't done it, he didn't know anything about it. At first, everyone thought that this was just a child's fantasy. However, when the scratching on the boy's body began to grow rapidly and spread throughout the entire torso, no one could deny that something bad was happening. And then came the moment when the mother found Robbie hanging upside down on a chair as if someone had hanged him. There were also other inexplicable incidents. Furniture moved on its own, objects flew through the air, and chairs overturned. It got to the point that the boy's mother had to leave the house because she couldn't take it anymore. She went to stay at her friend's until everything calmed down. And even then, people saw weird things happening in the house. Sometimes they heard the piano playing by itself, and then they saw that a vase had fallen off the table. Other times, they would hear scratching sounds, similar to those that came from a match being dragged along a rough surface. All of this caused the mother and other members of the family to become extremely worried. The mother went to a Lutheran pastor, Reverend Luther Miles Schultz, and asked for help. He talked to Robbie and listened to what had happened, and since nothing could explain it, he told the mother that she needed to find the Catholic Church and ask for help there. To be honest, even he was scared of what he had seen. He claimed that the boy had incredible strength, and he managed to overturn a chair despite the fact that he was only 13 years old. Plus, the boy left various inscriptions on the walls which resembled writing but were actually gibberish. Additionally, according to the pastor, he observed how objects levitated in the air, and he heard various sounds from the boy's room. Even the neighbors were able to witness how books fell off the shelves, the television set produced strange noises, and the screen flickered with unusual images. Furthermore, the pastor himself occasionally experienced these inexplicable moments. For example, once he was walking past the house and suddenly the cross that hung from the window hit him right in the face. Another time he was standing nearby and suddenly felt something touch his cheek as if someone had lightly slapped him. So, after talking to the boy's mother, the pastor advised her to seek help from the Catholic Church. And so in December 1949, the Hunkeler family, together with Robbie, moved in with his uncle in St. Louis, Missouri, who was a member of the Catholic Church. Through his connections, he managed to get the family in touch with Father William Bowden, who was the head of the St. Louis chapter of the Catholic Exorcist Society. In general, the process of performing an exorcism was quite long and complicated. First, the family had to prove to the church that there was a demon inside Robbie. To do this, the church even sent 2 priests to the house where the Hunkeler family temporarily lived to see for themselves what was going on. So on January 27, 1949, Father Walter Halloran and Father Albert Hughes arrived at the house. Father Halloran was a Jesuit priest who served in the Society of Jesus. He would later become famous for his work in the exorcism of Robbie. And Father Hughes was a professor at Kenrick Seminary. Both priests were well versed in cases like this and knew exactly what they were getting into. They talked to Robbie and performed various tests to determine if there was a demon inside the boy. For example, the priests showed him a Bible and asked him to touch it. However, as soon as he did, he started to scream and convulse. And when the priest sprinkled holy water on him, he fainted. All of this convinced the church that there was indeed a demon inside Robbie, and they allowed the exorcism to continue. The process began on March 2, 1949. The first thing the priests did was perform a blessing of the house. After that, they started talking to Robbie. They asked him questions and demanded that the demon leave him. However, this did not bring any results. During the exorcism, Father Borodin wrote down what was happening in a diary. From his records, we can see that initially Robbie reacted calmly to the exorcism. He just lay down on the bed and waited for the ceremony to end. But after some time, the demon inside him began to get angry, and he started screaming, thrashing around, and even biting the priests. At first, the demon tried to fool them. He pretended to be innocent and asked the priests to leave. He even tried to make Robbie speak in different voices, but this did not last long. The real Robbie manifested himself briefly and cried out, saying, "Don't listen to him." Then the demon broke free and began cursing the priests, calling them vile names. He said, "I am Lucifer, the son of the morning, and I'll take you to hell," and many other similar phrases. The demon also gave the priests his name. He said it was Pazuzu, and he ordered them to write it down in Latin and put it above the door. This way, he said, he would not have to repeat his name 100 times during the exorcism. During the exorcism, Robbie also spoke in languages that he didn't know, and he even uttered words in Latin that no one else could understand. The priests were shocked by all of this, but they continued to demand that the demon leave Robbie's body. They cast out the demon for several hours, but he always returned immediately afterward. Father Boldin noted that the demon seemed tired and weak, and therefore, during the breaks between the rituals, he demanded food and drinks. Once he even asked for whiskey and cigarettes. But the priests refused to fulfill these requests. During the exorcism, the boy's behavior was very strange. He talked in multiple voices and his body contorted in ways that seemed impossible. He hissed, spat, growled, and scratched everyone around him. The priests later said that the demon inside Robbie was very powerful. Robbie was only a child, but thanks to the demon, he had incredible strength. The boy's leg was even injured during one of the exorcisms. It happened when the priests cast him out, and he started flying around the room. Suddenly he crashed into the corner and hurt himself. On March, the exorcism reached its peak. That day, the demon inside Robbie became very aggressive. He cursed the priests, threatened them, and told them that they wouldn't win. The priests continued the ritual despite the demon's resistance, and eventually the demon agreed to leave. However, he warned them that this wasn't the end and that he would be back. Father Boldin wrote in his diary that he had never encountered such hatred and anger emanating from one person before. The demon seemed to hate the priests and wanted to destroy them. That same evening, however, the family noticed that Robbie looked much better. He smiled, laughed, and joked. His eyes were clear, and he behaved like a normal boy. The priests were happy with the result, and they decided to continue performing the rituals. Just in case, they visited Robbie every day and made sure that the demon didn't return. In April 1949, the exorcism was officially completed. Throughout the procedure, Robbie remained under the supervision of doctors and psychologists who monitored his health. They also performed various tests on the boy to determine if there was any mental illness present. After the exorcism was over and Robbie was back to normal, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, after 3 months, the boy's condition deteriorated again. He lost weight, became depressed, and stopped talking. Once again, the doctors and priests intervened and decided to repeat the exorcism, but this time it didn't have the same effect as before. The demon didn't leave Robbie and continued to torment him. Eventually, the priests realized that they needed to perform an emergency exorcism. On October, they gathered at Robbie's house and started the ritual. This time, the situation was even scarier than before. Robbie screamed, thrashed around, and bit the priests. He even bit Father Halloran so hard that blood came out. On November 18, 1949, the priests decided to try a new tactic. They told Robbie that he could talk to God and that he should ask God to help him. Robbie closed his eyes and whispered something. The priests couldn't hear what he said, but suddenly the room began to glow with white light. Everyone was stunned by this, and when they looked at Robbie, they saw that his eyes were shining brightly. He opened his mouth wide and yelled, "Satan, I am Saint Michael. I command you to leave this body right now." There was silence in the room, and suddenly Robbie screamed, "Get out, you filthy animal! Leave this body! I belong to God now! Get out!" After that, Robbie fainted and didn't wake up for a long time. The priest stood by the bed and waited for him to come to. They were afraid that the demon would leave, but then return again. But after a few minutes, Robbie opened his eyes and looked at the priests. He was no longer possessed. In total, there were 23 exorcisms performed on Robbie, and each one was unique and full of surprises. In fact, these procedures were like battles between good and evil, and as in any battle, there were victories and defeats. But in the end, good triumphed over evil, and Robbie was freed from the demon. But the question arises, what kind of demon was it? The answer lies in the name of the demon. Azazel is the name of a demon that has been known since the Middle Ages. He is often depicted as a goat with wings and is considered a symbol of chaos and evil. According to the legends, Azazel appears in the Old Testament, specifically in the Book of Enoch. It is described as a fallen angel who taught people how to make weapons, swords, and shields, as well as how to fight and inflict damage. In exchange, the humans promised the demon that they would make him king. But when Azazel demanded that the earth's inhabitants worship him, they betrayed him and locked him up. But he managed to escape and wandered around the earth looking for a new body to inhabit. And it was at this moment that he found Robbie Hunkeler. After the exorcism, Robbie's life changed dramatically. He could no longer live like a regular child because he knew too much about the other side of reality. But his story didn't end there. It was he who later told the story of the exorcism to writer William Peter Blatty, and it was based on this story that he wrote the novel The Exorcist, which was later made into a movie. The movie was a huge success and became one of the best horror movies of all time. As for Robbie, he married and lived in Texas until his death. Only his close relatives knew about his difficult childhood, and even they rarely talked about it. But the story of the exorcism continued to circulate around the world, both among believers and non-believers. Some believe that it is a true story that happened in the United States. Others claim that it is a complete lie and that everything was invented for the sake of sensation. However, regardless of whether the exorcism really happened, the fact remains that it impressed people around the world and left an undeniable mark in the history of cinema. If you've watched all the way to this point, I thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed the video, show your support by liking and sharing. Also, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.